firstly, I'm going to go through the Cairo Codebase and explain the contract architecture to people. And then from that, I'm then going to go into the React Codebase and explain everything, and explain how we can explain how you can add easily add apps and work on the UI. All right, let me just get this up. All right. So Cairo is is a little bit of a weird language. It's very low level, but it's actually very expressive and very powerful once you kind of grasp it. So, but look, to be honest, it took me a few weeks to kind of definitely get comfortable with it. You just need to kind of there's some real quirks if you're coming from Solidity. If you're coming from Python, it's probably more familiar. It's kind of like a Python Solidity hybrid. That's probably the best way to explain it. It's kind of like write provable programs. You got to do some weird assertions to check, to do permissions checks and whatnot. But overall, it's actually very logical, and it's also quite verbose. You have to write everything out because it doesn't have loops. But yeah, so this is the code base. So this is the Realms contract repository on GitHub, and it's just like a mono repo. So we've got our tests. We've got a CLI we're working on. We've got the Open Zeppelin base contracts, which are base Cairo contracts. Then we got the deployments. These automatically get made. Some data layers, and the contracts, just where the fun happens. And so we've got a bunch of different projects going at the same time. We've got DSiege in here. We've got the resource swap exchange contract, which is interesting. I'm not going to go through this today because it's still quite a bit of whip. Then we've got some helpers, some early iterations of the loot contracts, the NFT marketplace, which is, we can go through that. And then we've got the settling game, which is the Beast contract set. And then we've got some Solidity contracts, because it is a mono repo and you kind of have to, working with mainnet contracts as well as Cairo contracts, so that's why we keep them in here. There's no real standard, like best practice for any of this stuff yet, so we're just kind of, building this out as we go, because there is nobody to base it off. We are literally front running this whole industry right now. On-chain gaming on StarkNet. That's why we've had to build basically the whole technology stack from scratch. So the way the settling game works is, and it just because we're such a small group of people, I'll just go through like one section and then people can ask questions, because otherwise, if we get right to the end, then it might get a bit of out of context. So the way the settling game works is there is this arbiter contract, which is like it's the owner of the entire game. It sets the read and write access for modules. And this itself will be owned by the people who own multisig. And just to note with Cairo, StarkNet, is that there isn't there isn't like contracts and accounts in ETH. So in ETH you can deploy a contract, but you also have like a signature account, which is like your MetaMask wallet account, and that can sign transactions and you can send the funds within that. And those accounts can own contracts. But in StarkNet, you only have contracts, so there is no accounts as well. It's your account is a contract, and so that's when people refer to account abstraction. That's what that means. That's pretty. It's a really powerful abstraction, and ETH has been trying to do it for years. I'm not sure why. Maybe Vitalik just. I mean, he thought of a lot of things. Maybe they just didn't think of it at the very beginning. But anyway, what it allows to do is you can write really quite easy multi-sigs, or you can write scriptable accounts. So, for example, you could write an account that when it gets received ETH, it automatically just converts that to USDC, or it automatically routes a percentage of it to another contract, and splits it, or I mean, it's basically you can do whatever you want with these with your accounts now. So it's opening up this whole new design space in the smart contract world. So the arbiter will be owned by a multi-sig account, which will be the Biblio account, and it basically determines the upgradability of these contracts. Because another thing to note is when you're building an on-chain game, we will need to update contracts, because games require iteration, so you do need some upgrade path. But then it begs the question, well, who can upgrade, and what's the process for upgrading? And it needs to be the DAO multisig to do that, and it needs to be voted on. And so the arbiter basically controls all the read and write access to all the modules. And so the modules are where all the logic happens and where all the game dynamic, the dynamic game events happen. And then we have the module controller, which is like it's like a switchboard, probably the best way to explain it. It is controlled by the arbiter, and it contains like all the addresses for all the modules. It contains any external contracts that we use within the game, and it's a long-lived lookup table that all the other modules call when they need to when they need to request an address. So it means that the modules themselves don't really contain the logic, don't contain any state at all, and they just pull all their information from this module controller. It means it's abstracting all that logic into the controller. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff in here, like setting the genesis time as soon as the whole contract gets deployed. Just think of this as like the central, block, and then everything else is built off this. And when a module gets called, it goes through the module controller. And so that's kind of a quick TLDR on the architecture. And then you can see here we've labeled them L01 settling and like S01 settling. And so L standing for logic, S standing for state. And so in the logic modules, there's only logic. There is no there's no state contained, which means that if we want to update the logic, we just deploy a new logic contract, and the state keeps living, because then we just point the new contract at the old state, etc. And if we want to add a new state module, we just deploy a new state module and then point to it from the new logic contract too. So this way we can keep expanding the gameplay, but in a secure way. One sec. Yeah, so the settling logic is basically controls the staking and unstaking of the realms. And so what it does is, I'm obviously not going to go through every single contract function because that's probably here all day, but I'll go through some of the major ones. Yeah, the staking one's cool. So when you call this function, which is called settle stake, it gets the caller address, which is the person calling. It gets the module controller address, which is the module, which is explained, and it gets the current contract address. So these actually these functions like get contract address are actually like native StarkNet calls. So StarkNet has a bunch of these native things that libraries and built-ins that you can just pull in and use within the contracts. And then what it does here is it gets the realms address, and so it gets the realms address from the module controller, which if you've written Solidity before, this is like the interface. So the iModule controller, which is defined here, which is just it's a namespace to tell the contract that this function exists within the within the controller address. And then so it calls this function, gets the external contract address, which is the which is stored in the state. And then you have to pass the address as the first parameter when you're calling an external contract. And then we pass in the namespace of the external contract ID realms, which is well, it's what is it? So it's 2. So this is just a namespace for keeping everything consistent. So it passes in 2, and then it returns the realms address, and then we use that. And so it does the same thing with the S realms, and it does the same thing with the settling state. And so that's how you request information from the module controller. And so the way staking works in the realms is that you take your realm and you settle it, and it transfers that realm into this address, into this contract, and it mints you an S realm. And so an S realm is like a synthetic realm or a staked realm, whatever we want to call it. And this is like your deed to the realm, basically. And so you use this token to claim your resources and to interact with all the game state. But your actual realm contract token is stored within this contract. And so that's what these two functions do. Transfers your realm, and then it mints you an S realm. And then it updates the world state, which is this little function down here. And so it sets your time staked. So you can see here I'm calling the interface, the settling state interface, and it sets your time staked to the current time. I'll get to this function later. And it sets your vault time to the current time as well. And it checks this is like how the wonder tax works. It sets the total realm staked currently, and then it fetches the current staked realm, and then it if that realm contains a wonder, it sets that state that a wonder has been settled. And then it emits an event. So this is how the emits work in Cairo. You import them like this, and then you emit them like this. and this gets captured by our indexer, and then updates to state, and then reflected on the UI, and then it returns true. Settled unsettled basically works the same way, except it's in reverse. So fetches the addresses, checks if you can claim if there's resources to be claimed, and then if it is true, then it claims the resources, sets the world state to the current claimed time, and then transfers you back your realm, and then burns the S realm, and then emits an event. So yeah, that was like a TLDR of the of how the staking works. I'm actually planning on a lot of this stuff's been pathfinding, and I'm going to make probably going to make a staking NFT staking library on Cairo when I get around to it, which basically modularizes all this stuff into an easy to use library. So that's the settling logic, and then I'll probably just I'll go through this one as well, because this one's probably this is the biggest function in the entire game. This is the...
Yeah, so Lord, can I ask a question now before we
dive
into
sure.
the discuss module?
Go.
Yeah, sure. So let me just kind of play my understanding of how the accounts work, right? Like in Ethereum, yes, you have an account, and it's controlled through MetaMask, right? So today, yes, all these realms are ERC 721, and you have your Ethereum account, and if you hold a realm, yes, you can operate that through your MetaMask wallet, right? And in case of StarkNet, right? You got to have an account, right? Like if I'm a player, I've got an account, and I operate through ArgentX, right? And these two are two different accounts, right? And I assume that there is not linked. There is no way to link your account on Ethereum to your account on StarkNet. Is that right?
Currently, yes. MetaMask probably will support that in the future, but the way to do it is through Argent. But when you do the bridging, or when you do the claiming of your realm, depending if you're already staked in the Galleon or Carrick, you'll be deposited your realm to your Argent address.
Realm or yes realm?
The realm. You won't be. This won't auto stake. We're not going to auto stake your realm in this world. You'll just have to stake it, but staking doesn't cost anything on StarkNet really. So you'll have to you'll get received your realm on StarkNet, and then you'll just have to click stake on it into this. So it's the Galleon was like a bridging contract. It wasn't like a auto stake into this. We kind of want people to have to kind of go through that process of staking and unstaking rather than just being automatically staked. It's going to be a really simple process. You just have to click a button. Yeah, but yeah, it'll be straightforward.
Sure. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I'm just trying to kind of play in my head in terms of a couple of scenarios, right? Scenario one, say someone who has already staked in the Galleon, right? Like what you're saying is that realm will automatically be transferred to StarkNet, and you'll be also issued an equivalent S realm in your to your account. Is that right? Because
you'll receive you'll have the realm on StarkNet, which will appear in your account. Yeah. And then you'll just have to click settle that realm.
Yeah. Okay. And then I'll get the S realm in my account.
Then you get the S realm. Yeah. Like you don't like the S realm. Like you kind of it will have like a realm like in the user interface. It'll probably just be represented as is this realm staked or is it not staked. Sure. It won't be like there won't be two different things. There won't be like a S realm and a realm. It's just from the contract side of things, that's how it works. But like from the user interface point of view, it'll just be like, is this realm staked, or is it not? And it'll show like staked or not staked. But you'll either have the realm or the S realm at that point.
Okay, so that is scenario one, right? Scenario one for players who have already staked, right? Scenario two could be like someone new who's kind of buying Realm of OpenSea. Assume that we have already migrated to StarkNet and the game is up and running. So in this case, the player who's bought this Realm from OpenSea, what would be the process? Like where would they kind of
Okay, yeah. So if you're still on mainnet, you
Mhm.
you would go to the bridging contract. So we're
Okay.
building a bridge as well, which like the Galleon and Carrack acts as like an auto bridge. But there will be like a base bridge, which will you'll be able to transfer a realm from mainnet to StarkNet, and when you initiate that bridge, it will then create the realm on StarkNet for you, and then
Okay.
once you go through
And
that.
at that time, you need to have an Argentex wallet, right? And
Yeah,
an
you'll need
account.
an Argent wallet. Like you won't be able to do the bridge unless you have an Argent wallet and with an address.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of security we're like going to bake into that. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. So this is the other main this is the other main contract function that happens in this game. This is the claim resource function. I thought it's probably good to explain this one because it goes into all the logic. And so you can see here, I'm calling the module controller for all these different addresses. You can see how, it's a little crazy. And what we do is we check the owner of the S realm. So we check that, you own that realm that you're trying to claim. And if you do own it, you can proceed. If you don't, it will tell you it's not your realm. Then what it does here is that it creates. So the one quirky thing about Cairo is that you can't, you can't create dynamic arrays. You have to like specifically define them, and so you have to do that here. And so what we do here is we create a temporary array for the resource IDs, temporary array for the user mint, and a temporary array for the wonder tax. And then we fetch the realm data from the realm contract. We calculate the total days available, which works like it gets the current time staked and then the current time, and then divides that over a day. And then if there are like a full day accrued, it returns that. And so then you can only claim a full day. You can only claim resources if like a full day has been accrued. So that's 86,400 seconds. Is everything's done in timestamps on the blockchain. And so if you do have a full day available, it does the same thing with the vault. So it checks if you have any vault days available, sums them up, and it certs that it's not zero. So this will just like the function will fail if it is zero. And then it sets the current time staked and returns any remaining time that's left over to your stake time. So it means that say you try to claim 1.5 days in, it'll return that half day back into the timestamp. So then you can reclaim in a half a day. Gets the wonder tax, does some calculations, calculates the resource output according to the level of the resource. And then you see here, it looks like a bit like spaghetti code, but like we know that there's a max 7 resources that can exist on a realm. And so we need to set those arrays that we made to begin with to their specific values. So we set the resource IDs, and then we set the amount the user can mint, and then set the wonder tax that's being claimed from that. And then it just does that repeatedly for all 7 resources. And then it also mints the lords at the same time, because lords get calculated every day as well. And so we've just bundled these two functions up. So when you claim your resources, you'll also claim any lords available. And then it mints your lords, mints your resources, and then Minster Wonder Tax. So yeah, I mean, look, I don't know who's written Cairo here before, or if anyone's written Solidity, but I'm probably I'll just quickly go over the rest of the contracts, but I'm probably not going to go into any more functions because there's just too many.
So, Roland, just one other question before we move on. You mentioned about the resource, right? Like the resource generation, and the resources are generated at a fixed rate, right? And where is that rate, embedded in the code? Is it hard coded, or is it kind of dynamically picking from a configurable file or something like that?
Yeah. So like, it's currently just generated like 100 a day. And that's just
so
like
it's hard
I mean,
coded at the moment.
yeah, it like currently, but like really it's 100's just a nice round number to do the balancing of. And so it may be more, like it may be 1,000, but like it's still an arbitrary number, ultimately, because everything will be balanced off it. But the one thing that is constant is that all realms generate the same, like resources at the same rate. So like if you have a Dragonhide realm, Dragonhide and wood, you'll generate 100 Dragonhide and 100 wood per day. If you only have a wood realm, you only generate 100 wood per day. Or whatever that 100 figure is, every realm still generates the same amount. So it doesn't really matter what that 100, if it's 100, 1,000, a million. Ultimately, it's like it's just a it's just a figure.
Sure. And I hope that we don't have to change this rate at any time in the future. But just in case, a few months down the line or a couple of years down the line, if we have to change this rate, does it mean that this module has to be kind of upgraded, right? And deployed.
Yeah. Look, we'll on production launch, we're going to be certain of what the production output is. That's for sure. Like we're not going to change that.
And one way around it as well is we can make sort of a multiple version as well. Like a bundle of wood instead that's equal to 10,000 wood currently.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else have any questions about that? Tony Spider-Man? Or you just... all right. Yeah, so all the logic contained that's needed for resources within this file, and then the buildings within this file contain the way to build buildings, and so it works in a similar manner. It just it fetches the addresses, then it checks. It fetches the building costs, which are stored in the state, and then it builds the building according to the like you have to be very verbose with this. So basically, it has to check each ID. So if you're passing the ID 1, which is fairgrounds, then it updates your state that you're building one fairgrounds. It's just how you have to do it. So we do it for every single building here. This can be extended as well pretty easily. And then we just return. Actually, one thing I'll just, while we're on the topic of this, is storage on chain. And so like when we say like StarkNet's cheap, it is really cheap, and like Arbitrum's really cheap, and Optimism and all these L2s, they're really cheap. But until there is like data sharding or EIP 4.4.8.8, I think that was what it was. Storage is still going to be like expensive, and even after that, like you still want to optimize your contracts as much as you can, even on this like layer 2. Like you optimize your contracts on layer 1, but you still want to really optimize them on layer 2 if you can. So any way you can get savings is what we do. And so the saying goes, this is what Etherworm Parama termed, storage is cheap. Storage is expensive, computation's cheap. And so that's really what StarkNet thrives with, is just doing computation. So whenever we need to calculate a value, we have this like calculator contract, which just computes all the value. So it calculates the happiness, which is calculated from calculating the culture, which is calculated from how many like buildings you have. So we never actually store any of these values on chain. They're all just computed on the fly, and then these are used around the place. So there's no state storage of this. It's just you have to store the state where you have to, like in buildings, like how many buildings you have, but like you don't have to store any of these other values. So that's the kind of pattern that we use. And so when it comes to storing information on chain, use these things called bitmaps, which where is it? So a bitmap is like, actually I've got it in the README. Oh, the README. So a bitmap's like a, you basically convert, so every number is obviously can be binary. And a bitmap is a way to create these like really long binary numbers. And then you store this really long binary number as a decimal. And so this is this number in decimal form. And you store this you store this decimal number, and then you unpack it into its individual binary bits. Now, what I mean by that is, so you can see here, this is how we store the realm data on chain. So this is all stored in like one storage variable. So like the equivalent, it'd be storing one in uint 256 on Solidity. But we're storing all this information in one storage variable. And so we do that by creating these little 8-bit maps. And so, cities 7. And so we create an 8-bit map, which is, 111 is 7. And then we add 5 zeros in front of it. So it creates this like 8-digit number. And then we do that for all the, 4, 60, 10, 5, 1, 2, whatever the realm has. And then we convert it all into these little numbers. And then we add them to the end. Sorry, one sec. Sorry, someone's just at the door. And then you add them in, starting from the furthest right. You just like add them, concatenate them together, and you create this decimal number. And then this is what gets stored in that storage variable. And then when we want to use it, we pass it to this little unpack data function, which like splits it back up into its individual bits, and returns the decimal that you passed in. And so by doing that, we basically convert, well, how many is that? Like 13 numbers in, it's 13 potential storage slots into one storage slot. And so this is the pattern that's repeated across the whole game. And so with the buildings, we're actually storing 20 buildings, like storages, in one storage variable. And so by doing that, we drastically reduce the cost on StarkNet even more. Right, it's just all computed, right? So like when you update a building, when you build a building, it updates your building level, and then just like repacks that number into a new updated number. And so that's how that's how you upgrade buildings. That's how you upgrade resources, and that's how you build units in the game, using this same pattern. It's a really great compression technique. And then the other functions in this, this is like the unpack function, just returns some stuff. Gets to building costs, and this is how we store the building costs as well on chain. We, instead of storing all the different little bits, we just store one decimal number, and then we unpack them and compute it all on call time. Any questions about that? That's a pretty big interesting feature, which everyone should, any builders in here should explore when they start building anything like this.
Yeah. No, very interesting, pattern. Lot definitely will deep dive into this. So I'm not sure if you're going to cover the indexer module, because one thing I started thinking about is there a way for someone to kind of query, right? Like to say, okay, how many realms have
Mm,
constructed a new building in the last 2 hours or something like that. If I
mm.
wanted to do that, I hope I'll be able to do that through the indexer, right? So,
Yes,
and I
yes.
presume the indexer is going to kind of is automatically. Will you be, are you planning to cover that in terms of how the indexer works? Because I
Um,
presume the index is pulling these data, right?
yeah, I wasn't planning on going through the indexer. But like it's like an open API. Like we'll make it
Mm.
an open API for people to pull, and we'll make a bunch of documentation around it, so people will be able to build their own dashboards or build their own apps with it. And it's the it'll be the data bank for all the actions that happen on this game.
Yeah.
We'll probably make that public,
And
with this.
are those Cairo code as well? I mean, is the indexer Cairo as well?
No, no, no,
Or,
no, no. The index isn't Cairo. No. So the index is just TypeScript.
okay.
I can yeah. No, it's just a little. It's a Apollo server TypeScript GraphQL
Okay.
API. And it
Okay.
just
It just reads the state
well, it doesn't.
from
It
these
just it
contracts.
listens for the emit events. So that's
Okay.
all it does. So it just listens for the emits, and then maps the data. So the caller or the realm ID to where it needs to go. And so like you can't read the blockchain state on every request, because that's not what blockchains are made for. They're not made for
Hmm.
like you, that you can't just like they're not good. Like you need a cache for the data, and that's what the indexer does. It
Hmm.
just caches the information, and so then from the user side,
Hmm.
it's a much better user experience, because like you're like the if everybody's refetching, you know, like if you have 100 people refetching the same bit of data, like why call the blockchain 100 times when you just call the indexer?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
it doesn't make and blockchains are slow at responding comparable to like a high throughput API.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Makes sense.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean that's like um, that's the guts of the code, and the structure and the architecture of it all. Um, if anybody has any questions about this game architecture or Redbeard, you think I've missed anything, let me know. There's lots to cover, but I can't go into every single thing. But that was the big gist of it. So I mean, well, actually, one thing I should probably explain is, so Threep is as in Crypts and Caverns developer. I mean, he's basically, we're all just working as one team really at the moment. And so he has started working on his scripts module, and what he's done is, he's just copied the module template. Or actually, he's basically reusing this, because it works like staking. Crypts works in a very similar manner, like staking NFTs, which are claimable on the day. It's all very similar code. So he is building his module at the moment, and then when that's complete, we'll add it to the module controller, and the game gets expanded. As simple as that. And so anybody else that wants to come along can, do something similar. They can take the template module, or borrow some code from the rest of these, create a new module, and then if it gets approved, then it can get added into the game. That's the whole idea around this modular architecture, is that you can chop and change modules as new ones appear.
For anyone that does have an awesome idea for a module, what would the process be for them to get approved, or have some sort of confidence to start building it out?
Yeah, look, I think we're all working on that, right, in terms of like the approval process. I think the best thing to do, if you do have a really good idea, is maybe go into the builders chat and and discuss the idea, and see if it gets, good feedback. But even still, it's probably, if you're really curious learner, then it might be even worth just diving in and forking the code and trying to build something if you really want to do that. But in terms of the approval, the base game, once we launch this game, the approval process is going to have to go through the DAO to increase the game state. That's just the way the process will work. All right. Well, if there's no other questions about the Cairo code, I might go into the React code base and show people around there as well. Can you see that new
Lord, I'm not sure if you're planning to cover the pillage logic. I'm not sure if there is anything different or anything interesting that you wanted to cover there.
I think I'm planning on doing these talks. I think, every week or so. I might just make them, casual update on dev update. They don't have to be huge big things, but we can all the devs can get in here and we can just talk about what we've currently done that week. Now I think Milan's still chipping away at the finalizing the combat, so I think I'd prefer to wait until that's where that's complete, because the combat module is this whole beast of a thing, and the way the whole logic works and everything. So maybe we'll save that for next week.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly, I'm sure a lot of people, React.js is one of what most people learn first or second when they get into development. So, and hopefully, this is it looks intimidating, a big code base, but we welcome contributors. And so if you have ideas, once we release this, beta UI, feel free to, fork it, propose updates to the UI or whatever, and contribute. And so this is the, I've called it that, but it's called the Realms React repository on GitHub. And so this is our mono repo for storing all our UI apps. And within this repo, we only have one app currently, which is called the Atlas, which is the Atlas everybody knows. And within it is the Next code base. And so we've done it. It's worth noting, we've created this mono repo because it allows allows us to easily add more apps, or allows anybody to add more apps into this code base and share the same components. And so we have a component library here, which contains, shared components and shared styles. And so the benefit of this is we can just pull these shared components into any app that we make. And so currently they're just getting pulled into the Atlas, but after this Atlas first iteration's up, we're going to refactor the main Biblio site, and then any other small apps that pop up, or if someone wants to build a specific dashboard, they could also just fork this and build a dashboard app and share all the components. We probably will make the components like a public package at some point, but it's an active development right now, so they're not really stable.
And to that, we'll probably add some sort of helper function for all the Realm data that exists at the moment, like getting the Realm resource names from an ID, as an example, as a general purpose TypeScript library.
Yeah, all that stuff. So yeah, like within the repo, there's, it's a pretty common, next app, this one. So there's all the components, and everything that we need. It's in active development, so some things can be cleaned up, and there's we are building everything in the open here, so nothing ever gets built perfectly the first time, and so we're it's a constant process. But big thanks to Redbeard and Tenox. They've been the leaders of this whole repo, and I will actually show. Yeah, probably don't need to go into all these. React's a pretty common language. If you are a developer, just fork this repo and you can play around with the components or whatnot. I'll just gonna get the app up. So this is actually the current iteration of the app, and we're planning on launching this. So this is the first time this has been publicly shown. This is like the beta UI for what the game will look like. It's an iteration on the current Atlas. The version that we'll release in the next 2 days, won't contain, like connection to the actual game contracts. But we thought we would, in the nature of iteration, release this, and get feedback from everyone and build in the open whilst we connect the contracts up. Like, we're basically at the point where what I just showed you in the contracts, I deployed them last week, but there was an issue with them, so we're redeploying them again, and building out the CLI tool to easily interact with them. And then once that's done, they will start interacting with the index will capture their events, and then the index will represent that information in the UI. So we're really close. It's always the last 5% that takes the longest. But yeah, so this is the current interface. So there's the realms, loot, GA, crypts, trade, bank, and DSiege. And within here, and so just to note, this is all indexer data now. So this is where all the information is coming from. Information about the realms. Yeah, you can't harvest yet, but it's coming soon. You can filter. You can filter by orders. Oh, so there's 2 Dragonhide in Rage. How about that? Didn't know that. And so this is a big UX improvement on the last Atlas, and it kind of makes the main current Biblio site redundant. So we're going to remove a lot of the functionality from that site and just and push people into this interface. You can search by regions and slider, and then you can search by loot. You can also save your favorite. Oh, I need to fix that, but you can see there's probably bugs around the place, but that's the nature of software. You can save your favorite loot, or you can fly to your loot bag. For some reason, my Linux machine, this is super laggy. It's way better on my Windows machine. But we are working on ways to improve the performance of the Atlas. It's turning into quite a massive app. So we're hitting kind of limits with the load times and whatnot. So, but there are some optimization things we're working on. And then GAs, same thing. And so if anyone has any UI UI input or UX input, please just drop it in the builders chat, and let's build this interface together. And here's the Crips interface. So these are the new Crips icons. These are the Crips resources that will be generated from each environment. this is still yeah. So this is the current state of the UI, but you can see this is the early coming soon. This is what the this is what the this is what the game is going to look like in its first iteration. So yeah, I mean, anyone have any questions about that, the React code base or the UI or anything at all? All right. Well, anything else people want me to go over? Oh, is there any questions in the chat?
I presume, Lord, that you're going to cover the process around testing. I think testing could be. I remember seeing you mentioning in the chat that testing could be a challenge with the Cairo contracts. So are you planning to cover the test process in one of the feature calls?
Testing? You mean
Testing.
Do you mean like actually just interacting with them, or like test suite of them, or?
Yeah, in terms of interacting, right? Like I'm talking about unit testing, right? Like you piece of how do you do it, right? Like it's about interacting with these contracts. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're building a testing suite into the contract base, so that always gets run. I think once we connect up the alpha contracts to this, and it's in an acceptable state, then we'll open up a alpha game to we'll do it. We'll make it a private alpha to begin with, so we kind of only want builders and people that understand code or understand interfaces before we open it up to everyone. And so we'll probably do like an internal alpha with selected people. Well, anyone will be able to join it, but and then we'll do like a totally open beta because like I want this game to launch as soon as possible. Everybody does, but like if we need to be we need to be comfortable with the balancing and everything when it does go live. And there are a lot of moving parts, like the balancing around buildings and how that affects your computed stats, and then how the troops, the troops balancing between, attacking and defending, all these things. Like there's a reason why games are the most complicated pieces of software in the world. And there's a reason why they all have alphas and betas, and there's a reason why they all still have bugs. Like we're not creating a AAA game like graphics game with a million artists building all these things, and but still we need to get everything right. So so the longer the longer we can do an alpha and the beta, the better, in my mind. Because we want this thing to last for years. This isn't just a short bang. Like we're building a castle here, and we're building the foundation for an ever expanding ecosystem.
I missed the first 10 minutes, but did you actually go through what that test suite looks like on the Cairo side?
I think I actually jumped over that. Yeah, it's just the testing is kind of still an active kind of work because I'm still working out the best way to. Oh, what's going on? Hang on, I'll just. Yeah, the test suites are like, this is the one big issue with Cairo right now. It's just the testing is super clunky, and every other developer I've talked to, building in this space, like, agrees. Like, they just take a long time. In terms of the tests, like, this took 14 minutes to run this entire test, which is insane. And I've been trying to work on a cache strategy, but I keep getting errors because basically the code base, because these are all the contracts that need to be deployed. There's so many of them. They basically just, the cache doesn't seem to want to work for it. But yeah, I mean, this is an active development, all these tests. But yeah, Neo, like, that every function is checked currently. It's just, it's not in the most efficient. By efficient, I mean like it just takes a time, and like every module that gets added just adds more time, and everything, every every new test, every function that you add to the test just adds more time as well. But yeah, I mean, and I think there's a bunch of other Cairo developers in Matchbox who I'm going to who are really interested in looking over the whole game state as well. And so I'm going to be passing it off to them in the next week. I just needed to get it to a point where it was, well commented and, in an alpha state. It's you think you've solved these problems, and then you just keep chipping away at them, and it's that last 5% that takes a long time. But yeah, we're really close to having these totally deployed on alpha on a test net. And you can see the UI is, it's really close to being in a usable state as well. So yeah, in short, we're really close to the alpha. It's just connecting it up, testing all the infrastructure, finding bugs and whatnot.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, we're going for about an hour now. As I said before, I'm hoping to do just more casual, coding live streams. I'll probably just pop in here once a week with other devs who are around, and we can just talk about, the current process, any cool things happening in StarkNet, and and people can just pop in and ask questions. It doesn't have to be a huge formal table. I just kind of want to spark curiosity in building on Cairo, and spark curiosity in building games. So I hope that I answered a lot of questions, and if anything does pop up, or you do fork this and play around, just pop into the chat, into the builders chat, and say where you got stuck, because it is quite intimidating, I know, to kind of get involved in this big project. But you need to start somewhere. The first step is cloning the repo or forking it. All right. Well, let's end it there then, Squid.